You're at a party, surrounded by people laughing and talking, and you feel completely alone. Not ignored people have smiled at you, made small talk. But there's a glass wall between you and everyone else. This isn't shyness. It isn't introversion. It's loneliness, and it works against you in ways that seem almost deliberately cruel. The lonelier you feel, the harder connection becomes. Today we're examining the psychology of this paradox, why reaching out feels impossible precisely when it would help most, and what the science says about breaking free. Here's a statistic that should stop you cold. According to the World Health Organization, loneliness is linked to an estimated 100 deaths every hour, more than 871,000 deaths annually worldwide. And yet loneliness often goes unrecognized, even by those experiencing it. We dismiss it as a personal failing, a character flaw, when it's actually a biological alarm system gone haywire. The U.S. Surgeon General put it starkly: the mortality impact of lacking social connection is equivalent to smoking up to 15 cigarettes per day. It surpasses the risks of obesity and physical inactivity. First, let's be clear about what loneliness actually is. It's not the same as being alone. Some people thrive in solitude. Others feel desperately lonely in a crowded marriage. Loneliness is a subjective state, the painful feeling that your social connections are inadequate for your needs. It's the gap between the relationships you have and the relationships you want. Researchers distinguish between social isolation, which is objective, measurable lack of contact, and loneliness, which is the emotional response. You can have one without the other. But here's where it gets complicated. Loneliness isn't just an emotion, it's a physiological state that actually changes your brain and body. It triggers your threat detection systems. When you're lonely, your brain enters a state of hypervigilance. It starts scanning for social threats the same way it would scan for predators on a savanna. Every interaction becomes a potential danger. This is the paradox at its core. Lonely people become more attuned to rejection cues. They notice the slight hesitation in someone's voice, the glance away, the smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes, and crucially, they interpret ambiguous social signals negatively. A neutral expression becomes hostility. A busy friend becomes a friend who doesn't care. The evidence piles up, even when it's imagined. The research is consistent on this. Lonely individuals don't just feel rejected more, they expect rejection before it happens. They've learned to preemptively protect themselves by withdrawing. This creates what psychologists call a self-reinforcing cycle. You feel lonely. Your threat detection ramps up. You perceive rejection everywhere. You withdraw, and the loneliness deepens. Nearly 1 in 3 American adults feels lonely on any given week, according to Surgeon General Vivek Murthy. That's roughly 100 million people cycling through the same pattern. The mortality data is sobering. A meta-analysis of studies found that social isolation increases the risk of death by 29%, loneliness by 26%, living alone by 32%. But there's a distinction worth noting. The same meta-analysis found that social isolation has a stronger association with mortality, 74% increased risk compared to loneliness at 43%. This suggests that the objective lack of contact may matter even more than the subjective feeling, but the two are deeply intertwined. Lonely feelings often lead to isolated behaviors. The good news, if we can call it that, is that meta-analytic data shows being socially connected increases your odds of survival by 50%. Connection is genuinely protective. So why, when connection literally saves lives, does loneliness make connection feel so threatening? To understand this, we need to think about loneliness evolutionarily. For most of human history, being separated from your group meant death. No shared food. No protection from predators. No help raising children. Your brain evolved to treat isolation as an emergency. Loneliness is essentially your brain's alarm system telling you to reconnect, like hunger tells you to eat or thirst tells you to drink. It's supposed to motivate social repair. But here's where it malfunctions. In an evolutionary environment, reconnecting was relatively simple: return to the group, offer help, share resources. Social repair had clear pathways. Modern life has fractured those pathways. We move for work. Communities dissolve. Social media creates the illusion of connection without its substance. The alarm keeps ringing, but the exits are blocked. And prolonged loneliness changes the alarm itself. What was meant to be acute becomes chronic. The threat detection system that was supposed to push you toward people starts pushing you away from them. Studies show that chronically lonely people have elevated cortisol levels, increased inflammation, and compromised immune function. The body enters a sustained stress response, waiting for an attack that never comes. The CDC reports that social isolation and loneliness are associated with a 50% increased risk of dementia, 29% increased risk of heart disease, and 32% increased risk of stroke. This is what makes the loneliness paradox so insidious. It's not just a feeling that makes social interaction uncomfortable. It's a physiological state that literally impairs your ability to connect. Nearly 40% of adolescents reported feeling persistently sad or hopeless in 2023 national surveys, with loneliness identified as a major contributing factor. This isn't a problem limited to the elderly. There's an ongoing debate about technology's role in this. Some researchers argue that smartphones and social media have fundamentally disrupted human connection patterns, especially for young people. Others contend that technology is neutral, that the real drivers are broader societal changes. Declining community institutions, increased geographic mobility, economic pressures that fragment social time. In 2023, the Surgeon General issued an advisory declaring loneliness a public health epidemic. In the same year, WHO launched a 3-year global commission on social connection. People who are lonely are twice as likely to become depressed. The relationship works in both directions. Depression can cause loneliness, and loneliness can cause depression. But perhaps the most revealing aspect of the loneliness paradox is how it affects memory. Lonely people tend to remember social interactions more negatively than they actually were. Even when an interaction goes reasonably well, the lonely brain tends to edit the memory. It highlights the moments of awkwardness, the pauses that felt too long, the jokes that didn't land. This means lonely people are often working with corrupted data. They believe social interactions go badly because that's what their memory tells them. The negative interpretation becomes the remembered reality. There's also the problem of social skills atrophy. Like any ability, social fluency requires practice. Extended isolation means fewer opportunities to maintain conversational rhythm, read cues, and navigate complex interactions. This creates another layer of the paradox. The longer you've been lonely, the rustier your social skills become, which makes interactions genuinely more difficult, which confirms your fears about connecting. So what can actually be done? The first step is recognizing the hypervigilance pattern. When you notice yourself interpreting neutral social cues negatively, pause. That might be loneliness distorting perception, not accurate threat detection. This isn't about dismissing your feelings. The perception of rejection feels absolutely real in the moment. But developing a habit of questioning your social interpretations can interrupt the cycle. Start with low-stakes connection. Rather than jumping straight to deep friendship, begin with brief, predictable interactions. Greeting a neighbor. Chatting with a barista. Exchanging a few words with a cashier. These micro-connections rebuild social confidence without the emotional risk of deeper vulnerability. They're practice runs. They remind your nervous system that not every interaction ends in rejection. Research consistently shows that quality matters more than quantity. It's not about having dozens of friends, it's about having a few meaningful relationships where you feel genuinely known and valued. Here's something hopeful. A meta-analysis of 280 studies found that psychological interventions designed to reduce loneliness actually work. This isn't a permanent state you're stuck in. The most effective interventions address those maladaptive social cognitions, the thought patterns that make you expect rejection. Cognitive behavioral approaches help you recognize and challenge distorted interpretations. Understanding that loneliness affects physical health can also be motivating. When you frame social connection as a health behavior as important as diet and exercise, it becomes easier to prioritize. If you find yourself repeatedly canceling plans, that's a signal. The relief you feel when avoiding social events is temporary. It reinforces the avoidance pattern and deepens the underlying loneliness. Push through that initial discomfort. Not always. Not with overwhelming force, but often enough that avoidance doesn't become your default. The discomfort usually fades within the first few minutes of actual connection. There's also something to be said for community rather than just friendship. Joining groups organized around shared interests, book clubs, volunteer organizations, recreational sports provide structure that makes connection easier. The advantage of structured activities is that they take the pressure off. You don't need to generate conversation from nothing. The activity itself provides shared focus and natural talking points. The debate about solutions continues in research circles. Should we focus on changing individual cognition and behavior, or restructuring environments to make connection easier and more natural? The answer is probably both. Individual intervention matters, but so does creating environments where connection doesn't require heroic individual effort. Sometimes the easiest path forward is changing where you spend your time. If you found this helpful, consider subscribing. We explore topics like this every week. And if someone you know might be caught in this cycle, sometimes sharing something like this can be a way of reaching out. The loneliness paradox is cruel, but it's not unbreakable. Understanding the mechanism, the hypervigilance, the negative interpretation bias, the withdrawal is the first step toward interrupting it. Loneliness evolved as a signal to reconnect. Modern life has made the reconnection harder, but not impossible. The alarm can be answered. The cycle can be broken. You don't have to feel ready. You don't have to feel confident. Sometimes you just have to show up anyway, and let the connection, imperfect as it might be, do its slow work of repair.